Liberia's medical crisis deepens. Top doctor disbarred over dubious credentials amid political tensions. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where we dissect Africa's most urgent stories with courage, clarity, and a call to action. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. Today we uncover the scandal rocking Liberia's health system. A top doctor struck off the register over alleged fake credentials. But is this just one man's fall, or a warning sign for African governance at large? Stay tuned. The removal of Dr. Peter Matthew George, former president of the Liberia Medical and Dental Association, LMDA, from the medical profession over questions surrounding his qualifications has sparked a wave of public concern and institutional scrutiny. The controversy, marked by conflicting documentation and political undertones, not only exposes flaws in credential verification systems in Africa, but also raises questions about transparency, accountability, and professional governance. This video critically examines the implications of this development, draws parallels across Africa, and explores the future of medical regulatory reform on the continent. The core of the controversy. In a dramatic development, the Liberia Medical and Dental Council, LMDC, the body responsible for licensing and regulating the practice of medicine, revoked the license of Dr. Peter Matthew George, citing insufficient evidence of his qualifications. Specifically, the LMDC stated that Dr. George failed to provide authentic proof of a medical degree from the University of Hertfordshire, UK, a university that, according to its official statement to the BBC, does not offer a medical degree program. There is no evidence that this individual was ever awarded any degree by the university, nor studied here. Any claim to the contrary is therefore false. University of Hertfordshire, BBC News, April 2025. The LMDC further questioned the credibility of a document Dr. George submitted, an award verification letter that used the term MD, a medical designation typically conferred by U.S. institutions, not British ones. Despite these findings, Dr. George insists he never claimed his primary medical degree was from Hertfordshire, instead attributing his qualification to the University of Central Nicaragua. This contradiction has severely undermined his credibility. A personal vindication or political persecution. In response to the allegations, Dr. George described the LMDC's action as a politically motivated vendetta stemming from his activism. He argues that tensions began after his election as LMDA president in December 2024, during which he vocally championed doctors' rights, especially over disputes around the reclassification of specialist roles within government hospitals. Maybe I made an error when writing because I'm under pressure. I have served the Liberian health sector diligently for over a decade with no record of misconduct. Dr. George to BBC. This assertion opens a troubling line of inquiry. Is this a genuine professional misconduct case or part of a broader pattern of political retaliation? In many African countries, whistleblowers and reform-minded professionals frequently face systemic pushback, especially when they challenge entrenched bureaucratic or political interests. Africawide perspective. A systemic weakness in credential vetting Liberia's scandal is far from unique. Across Africa, gaps in vetting professional qualifications, particularly in the medical and academic sectors, are alarmingly common. For instance, Kenya. In 2020, a top Nairobi doctor was found to have falsified credentials from India and had practiced for over a decade before discovery. Daily Nation, 2020. Nigeria. The Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, MDCN, regularly publishes lists of fake medical practitioners with over 400 disbarred in the last 5 years alone. Punch Nigeria, 2023. Ghana. In 2022, A man masquerading as a specialist gynecologist at a major Accra hospital was arrested after being exposed by patients. Ghana Web, 2022. These incidents point to a broader governance crisis in Africa's professional sectors, marked by inadequate background checks, political interference in licensing boards, and limited cross-border qualification verification mechanisms. Regulatory gaps and institutional failures. The LMDC's decision to strike off Dr. George, while procedurally valid, also reflects delayed institutional action. If Dr. George has indeed been practicing since 2014, why did the LMDC only initiate a credentials audit in 2025, more than a decade later? This suggests the absence of a centralized digital credential verification system and the failure of proactive audits, a systemic issue also seen in other African countries. Without such mechanisms, professional fraud can go unchecked, undermining patient trust, public safety, and institutional legitimacy. Moreover, Liberia lacks strong whistleblower protection laws. If, as Dr. George claims, he is being targeted for activism, the case also highlights the vulnerability of professionals who speak out, especially within politically sensitive institutions. Political undertones and public trust. The LMDA's decision to nullify Dr. George's presidency shortly after the LMDC's revocation of his license adds fuel to speculation about institutional bias or internal politics. It remains unclear whether the LMDA conducted its own independent investigation or merely echoed the LMDC's decision. Either way, this undermines public confidence in Liberia's health governance framework. The public, meanwhile, is caught in the crossfire, unsure whether to support a doctor who claims persecution or a regulatory body that failed to identify red flags for over a decade. A forward-looking reform agenda for Africa. Liberia's case must serve as a wake-up call for African governments and regulatory bodies. Below are forward-looking recommendations that can help prevent future scandals. 1. Establish a Pan-African credential verification system, a continental database under the auspices of the African Union, AU, or ECOWAS, integrating data from universities and professional councils worldwide, can ensure real-time verification. 2. Mandatory revalidation of licenses. Every 5 years require doctors and dentists to resubmit proof of qualifications and continuing education to ensure both competence and integrity. 3. Digital credential storage and blockchain verification. Leverage blockchain to store tamper-proof digital certificates from accredited institutions to combat falsification. 4. Independent investigative committees ensure that internal probes, especially those tied to leadership roles or advocacy, are carried out by neutral third-party panels. 5. Whistleblower protection legislation. Safeguard professionals who raise red flags about corruption or malpractice within the system, especially in politically charged environments. The scandal surrounding Dr. Peter George reflects not just an individual's fall from grace, but a structural vulnerability within African medical institutions. Whether victim or violator, the case reveals painful truths, weak verification systems, reactive oversight, and the perilous intersection of professionalism and politics. As Liberia navigates this controversy, the rest of Africa must take stock and reform. The structural cracks in Liberia's medical oversight. To fully grasp the implications of Dr. Peter George's case, one must examine the operational landscape of Liberia's medical governance institutions, particularly the Liberia Medical and Dental Council, LMDC, and the Liberia Medical and Dental Association, LMDA. Both bodies are entrusted with maintaining ethical standards and public trust in the health profession, yet this case exposes significant lapses in institutional discipline, transparency, and accountability. Until 2025, Dr. George held a license and served in senior roles within government health facilities. If his credentials were indeed falsified, then the LMDC either failed in its initial pre-licensing checks or allowed political influence to supersede regulatory rigor. On the other hand, if his credentials were legitimate but poorly documented, the LMDC's revocation may raise ethical concerns about due process and professional fairness. Further compounding the matter is the LMDA's swift decision to nullify Dr. George's presidency. It is unclear if this move was based on independent inquiry or a reactionary alignment with the LMDC's decision. In either case, it creates the appearance of an internal institutional purge rather than a transparent and evidence-based disciplinary process. The dangerous consequences of systemic gaps. The potential consequences of such a scandal are wide-ranging and damaging. 1. Erosion of public trust in medical institutions. When citizens can no longer trust that their doctors are properly trained, confidence in public health systems collapses. This is especially dangerous in Liberia, where the health sector is still recovering from the impact of the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak, which killed over 4,800 people. WHO 2016. 2. Political interference in professional bodies. If advocacy or activism can lead to targeted credential audits and eventual dismissal, then professional independence is at serious risk. It sends a chilling message to other reform-minded doctors who may fear retaliation for speaking out. 3. Deterioration of international cooperation. Medical collaborations, foreign scholarships, and training exchanges often require that host institutions trust the competence of health professionals from partner countries. Liberia's reputation in this regard may suffer unless credible reforms are enacted. 4. Patient risk and legal liability. If patients treated by Dr. George over the past decade suffered due to incompetence or negligence, despite his claim of no misconduct, then legal and ethical liabilities may follow. This could open the floodgates to malpractice claims and lawsuits. Case comparisons, credential controversies across the continent. The George affair echoes other notable African scandals where credential fraud or political interference in professional regulation caused upheaval. 1. Tanzania. Fake doctors and politically motivated licensing. 2018-2021 reports emerged of unqualified individuals practicing medicine in remote areas of Tanzania, enabled by bribery and lack of oversight. At the same time, opposition-linked medical practitioners were investigated more aggressively than others. The Citizen 2020. 2. Nigeria. Disputed degrees from foreign online institutions. The MDCN had to launch a special task force to evaluate foreign medical degrees, particularly those from diploma mills in Ukraine, Sudan, and Eastern Europe. In some cases, practitioners had never stepped into a clinical setting. Vanguard Nigeria, 2022. 3. South Africa. Credential forgery in the private sector. A 2021 exposé by News 24 revealed several cases where surgeons forged residency completion certificates and used them to gain employment in private hospitals. The South African Health Professions Council, HPCSA, was criticized for its slow response. The underlying challenge: credential equivalence and verification in Africa. Africa faces a double-edged sword when it comes to professional qualification. On one hand, the continent suffers from brain drain, pushing governments to hire foreign-trained professionals. On the other hand, there's no unified framework to determine the equivalence, authenticity, or rigor of those foreign qualifications. For example, while the University of Central Nicaragua, mentioned by Dr. George as the institution that awarded his degree, is a recognized private university, it is not universally seen as equivalent to mainstream Western medical schools. Many of its degrees are awarded via third-party distance learning programs, sometimes in collaboration with study centers in other countries. This gray area of transnational academic partnerships is fertile ground for misrepresentation. especially when host countries lack strong accreditation laws. Liberia, like many others in the region, does not yet have a national qualifications framework, NQF, aligned with global standards such as the UNESCO Global Convention on Higher Education Qualifications Recognition, 2019. Moving forward, a continent-wide imperative. To avert future crises and restore public faith, the African Union, AU, and regional bodies like ECOWAS and the EAC must standardize recognition of medical degrees from foreign and local institutions, develop shared digital registries for health professionals with centralized records of academic credentials, licenses, and work history, mandate transparent audits of medical boards with clear reporting lines to the public, decouple professional regulation from political influence, possibly by strengthening legislative independence of health councils. Additionally, development partners and global health institutions, such as the WHO Africa Office, AFDB, and USAID health programs, should tie funding and technical assistance to the adoption of transparent credentialing and regulatory reforms. Legal implications. A brewing storm in the courts. As the scandal unfolds, questions are now mounting about legal redress, both for Dr. Peter George and potentially for the institutions involved. Dr. George's public denial of wrongdoing, coupled with his claim of political victimization, sets the stage for protracted legal battles, including wrongful dismissal claims against the LMDC. If Dr. George can prove his qualifications were valid, but mishandled or misrepresented. Defamation or reputational damage lawsuits, especially if his personal and professional reputation was damaged without a fair hearing or due process. Potential criminal investigations if further inquiries reveal intentional falsification of documents, which could carry charges under Liberia's penal law on fraud and false pretenses. Title 26, Chapter 15, Liberian Code of Laws Revised. At the same time, the LMDC may also face legal scrutiny. If it is shown that procedural lapses or failure to verify credentials at the point of licensing occurred, affected patients or civil society organizations could file class action suits or petitions demanding institutional reform and compensation for risk exposure. The Liberian government must tread carefully. Overreach in prosecuting Dr. George without transparent legal process could deepen public mistrust and risk setting dangerous precedents for suppressing professional advocacy. Conversely, inaction may be interpreted as endorsement of a culture of impunity. ECOWAS and regional oversight, a call for harmonized professional standards. Liberia's crisis also spotlights a long-standing gap in the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS policy framework, namely the lack of a regional standard for recognition, mobility, and verification of professionals, particularly in the health sector. Despite ECOWA's Protocol on Education and Training, 1993, and the Supplementary Act on the Harmonization of Curricula in 2007, there remains no unified credential evaluation authority akin to the European Qualifications Framework, EQF, or Pan-Commonwealth Register of Qualifications. This is especially problematic in a region where health professionals often migrate across borders, e.g., Guinean doctors working in Liberia or Sierra Leone. Many practitioners hold foreign or online degrees, sometimes from countries with no bilateral verification treaties. Fragile states with underfunded institutions rely on personal networks rather than formal systems to validate qualifications. An ECOWAS-led initiative to create a regional health workforce credentialing authority could mitigate these issues. Such a body would host a centralized digital credential verification database, develop equivalency standards for foreign medical degrees, including scrutiny of distance learning programs, coordinate disciplinary action across member states to prevent professionals disbarred in one country from simply relocating to another. Liberia could champion this initiative, especially given the embarrassment it currently faces, as a show of leadership in regional health governance. Public confidence and media narratives, a crisis of perception. Media coverage of the scandal, particularly by the BBC, international wire agencies, and local outlets like Front Page Africa, has brought the issue to global attention. But this spotlight comes with both risk and opportunity. Risk, a perception that Liberia is plagued by institutional incompetence or corruption in the health sector. This could impact donor trust, medical tourism, and healthcare worker morale. Opportunity, a chance to lead by example, initiate bold reforms, and earn international commendation for transparency and accountability if handled properly. Unfortunately, the vacuum of timely official communication has allowed speculation to flourish. Neither the Ministry of Health nor the Office of the President has issued a definitive public statement. In a region where conspiracy theories and political propaganda easily fill such voids, this silence is costly. Voices from the ground, medical practitioners, react among Liberia's medical professionals. The atmosphere is one of cautious frustration. Speaking to the Bold African Voice, BAV, several doctors who requested anonymity shared their concerns. This incident is embarrassing, but it's not isolated. We've known for years that some doctors got their licenses through back channels. The system is broken. Senior consultant, JFK Medical Center, Monrovia. Dr. George may have made mistakes, but he fought for our rights. Many of us feel this is payback for challenging the government. Resident Physician Redemption Hospital. The Liberia Medical Students Association, LMSA, also issued a statement calling for a transparent, independent review of the case, warning that young medical professionals are losing faith in the institutions meant to protect and guide them. This climate of fear and uncertainty threatens to derail progress made in the post-Ebola era, especially efforts to localize training, boost retention, and stem emigration of health workers. The role of development partners and donors, development agencies, including the World Bank, USAID, and the Global Fund, have invested heavily in Liberia's health sector post-2015. These partners should now reassess whether the institutional capacity of regulatory bodies like LMDC aligns with the transparency and governance standards they fund. For instance, future disbursements could be tied to implementation of a credential verification reform plan, establishment of external oversight committees involving civil society, legal experts, and international observers, periodic performance audits of licensing, investigation, and disciplinary procedures. Donors could also provide technical support for digitizing records, establishing biometric registration for practitioners, and deploying AI tools for cross-verification of credentials with universities and accreditation bodies globally. Case studies, lessons from African countries that reformed medical credentialing. While Liberia grapples with the fallout of the Dr. George scandal, several African nations have undertaken bold reforms in recent years that could serve as templates for Liberia and the broader ECOWA's region. 1. Rwanda, Digitized Health Workforce Registry. In 2018, Rwanda's Ministry of Health, in partnership with the Clinton Health Access Initiative, CHAI, and the East, Central, and Southern Africa Health Community, ECOA, launched a National Health Workforce Information System, IHRIS. This system stores verified credential data for all licensed health workers, tracks employment history, continuing education, and performance records, sends automated alerts for license renewals, ethical violations, or incomplete credentials. The result? Rwanda has drastically reduced incidences of credential fraud and improved deployment of qualified health professionals across rural and urban regions. We cannot talk about universal health coverage unless we first ensure those delivering care are truly qualified. Dr. Daniel Ngamije, Rwanda's former Minister of Health, 2019-2023. 2. Ghana, the Health Professions Regulatory Authority, HPRA. In 2019, Ghana passed a consolidated law merging the regulation of all allied health professions under one roof. The HPRA conducts pre-practice examinations for all foreign-trained professionals, requires credential equivalency assessments through partnerships with the National Accreditation Board, NAB, has real-time public access portals where patients and institutions can verify doctor credentials. Ghana's efforts have led to the revocation of dozens of licenses issued under unclear circumstances and restored public trust in medical oversight. 3. South Africa, CrossCheck protocols with medical schools. Following a spate of scandals in 2015-2021, South Africa's Health Professions Council, HPCSA, made it mandatory for all new license applicants to undergo direct verification with source universities, not just submit scanned certificates. This cross-check policy includes a dedicated credential verification unit, use of third-party verification agencies like WES and Dataflow Group, automatic alerts for degrees from known diploma mills. The global context: medical fraud in developing nations. While Africa is not alone in facing credentialing crises, the consequences in developing countries are often more severe due to limited healthcare infrastructure, weak legal frameworks, and high disease burdens. A few notable examples include India. In 2020, over 600 fake doctors were uncovered during a national crackdown, many practicing without a license in rural states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Times of India 2020. Philippines. Following several high-profile incidents of unlicensed surgery, the Philippine Medical Association now mandates a full background audit before issuing endorsements for foreign-trained professionals. Brazil. The Federal Council of Medicine runs a blockchain-based database that tracks doctors' qualifications and disciplinary history. Public access to this platform has significantly curtailed fraud. Liberia, if it wishes to join the ranks of reforming nations, must look beyond ad hoc investigations and move towards institutionalizing safeguards. The psychological toll on the medical profession. The broader psychological and professional toll of the Dr. George saga is now rippling across Liberia's health workforce. Interviews conducted by the Bold African Voice, BAV, with junior doctors, nurses, and administrative staff reveal rising levels of disillusionment, mistrust, and cynicism about institutional leadership. We feel like we are being watched, not protected. If our leaders can be destroyed without a fair process, what hope do the rest of us have? Intern, Tapita Regional Hospital. Morale is low. People come to work just to survive, not to serve. The damage isn't just to Dr. George, it's to the entire system. Senior nurse, Phoebe Hospital. In contexts like Liberia, where the doctor-to-patient ratio is already dangerously low, estimated at 0.037 physicians per 1,000 people, WHO 2023, any systemic breakdown in trust, motivation, or credibility can deepen existing fragilities. Rebuilding trust, a three-pillar framework for Liberia. To move forward constructively, Liberia must adopt a three-pillar strategy to rebuild institutional trust in its healthcare system. Pillar 1. Transparency and independent review. Establish an independent commission of inquiry into the Dr. George case, comprising legal experts, civil society, and medical professionals. Publicly release findings with full transparency, including recommendations for systemic reforms. Pillar 2. Regulatory System Overhaul Transition, LMDC and LMDA from state-affiliated boards to semi-autonomous regulatory agencies with built-in accountability mechanisms. Develop a centralized digital licensing platform supported by biometric registration, audit trails, and encrypted academic records. Pillar 3, National Dialogue and Healing convene a national health professionals forum, allowing frontline workers to voice their grievances and contribute to policy reform discussions. Launch a truth and reconciliation style approach to acknowledge institutional failings and chart a collective path forward. Chronology of Events, mapping the unraveling of the credentialing scandal. To fully understand the scope and potential consequences of the Dr. George scandal, it is important to reconstruct a clear timeline of events that led to the current crisis. This chronological mapping highlights not just the actions of individuals, but also institutional responses, or the lack thereof, that allowed the situation to fester. Timeline of key events 2010-2014. Dr. Peter George claims to have studied at the University of Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom, listing a professional doctorate in medicine, MD, on his LinkedIn profile. 2014. He begins practicing medicine in Liberia, allegedly submitting his qualifications to the Liberia Medical and Dental Council, LMDC, for licensing. No objections or investigations are recorded at the time. 2014-2023, Dr. George works in various public hospitals, eventually rising to medical director of the Chief Jalalone Government Hospital in Barpolu County. He gains recognition for improving medical infrastructure and services. December 2023, Dr. George is elected president of the Liberia Medical and Dental Association, LMDA, a position that elevates him to the forefront of professional medical advocacy. January-March 2024. Tensions escalate between the LMDA and the government over the reclassification and remuneration of public sector health professionals. Dr. George becomes a vocal critic of government policy, drawing both support and scrutiny. April 2024. The LMDC initiates a qualifications audit and formally requests proof of Dr. George's medical credentials, particularly his claimed UK degree. April 25, 2024. LMDC revokes Dr. George's medical license, citing failure to provide satisfactory evidence of graduation from the University of Hertfordshire. The university, in a statement to the BBC, denies any record of Dr. George ever attending or graduating. May 2024. Dr. George disputes the claims, stating that his primary medical degree is from the University of Central Nicaragua and denies ever asserting that he graduated from Hertfordshire. June 2024. The LMDA nullifies Dr. George's presidency, distancing itself from the scandal and stating that he is no longer a member of the association. July-August 2024. Widespread media coverage fuels public debate. Professional associations and civil society organizations begin calling for independent investigations and regulatory reform. September 2024. Present silence from the Ministry of Health and Executive Branch prompts calls for government accountability. Civil society groups begin exploring legal options for whistleblower protection and institutional reform. Stakeholder mapping. Who holds the power and who pays the price? In understanding the institutional and political dynamics of this case, it is critical to map the key stakeholders, their roles, and the stakes they hold in the evolving narrative. Stakeholder role, influence, potential risks, exposure. Dr. Peter George, central figure in the scandal. Former LMDA president, legal liability, reputational damage, criminal prosecution, LMDC, regulatory body, responsible for issuing, revoking medical licenses, accused of delayed action, weak verification processes, LMDA, professional body, represented doctors, revoked Dr. George's presidency, perceived as politically compromised, lacking independence. Ministry of Health oversees health policy and funding, criticized for silence, could face donor scrutiny. University of Hertfordshire institution implicated by false academic claim, reputational risk, credibility reinforced by prompt denial. University of Central Nicaragua, alleged source of George's degree, risk of being linked to degree mills, under investigation, health professionals, broader medical community affected by scandal, loss of morale, institutional mistrust, advocacy chilled. Civil society and legal advocacy groups, monitoring transparency and justice, opportunity to push for reforms and legal frameworks, international donors and development partners fund and support Liberia's health system, demand for stronger governance and accountability, strategic options for Liberia, cabinet level policy recommendations. In light of the institutional deficiencies exposed, the government of Liberia, particularly through its Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, and Civil Service Agency, should consider immediate and medium term strategic reforms. 1. Emergency Credential Review Audit Mandate review all active licenses issued since 2010 with a focus on foreign trained professionals. Timeline 6 months. Resources establish partnerships with credential verification services, e.g., Dataflow, WES. Outcome remove unqualified practitioners, restore public confidence. 2. Establish a national health credentials verification unit structure, a standalone entity under the Ministry of Health, with partial funding from external partners and legal independence. Technology incorporate digital verification, cloud databases, and biometric identification. Output real-time registry for all health practitioners, accessible to the public and employers. 3. Draft and enact a Health Sector Transparency and Accountability Act. Components mandatory disclosure of academic qualifications and licensing history, criminal penalties for falsification, protection for whistleblowers and internal auditors, consultation, engage civil society, law reform commissions, and international health law experts. 4. Rebuild LMDC and LMDA governance structures. Action. Reconstitute boards with professionals elected through transparent processes and limit government-appointed positions. Oversight. Introduce an independent ombudsman for professional conduct to investigate ethical violations and licensing corruption. The untapped potential of Liberia's medical diaspora. Amid the chaos and controversy surrounding Liberia's medical regulatory framework, one of the most underutilized assets remains the Liberian medical diaspora. Spread across North America, Europe, and parts of Africa, these professionals represent a well-trained, credentialed, and reform-oriented community whose involvement could be transformative if effectively mobilized. Key contributions of the diaspora. 1. Technical expertise and institutional reform support. Liberian doctors practicing abroad have first-hand experience working under strict regulatory regimes such as the General Medical Council, GMC, in the UK, or the American Medical Association, AMA, in the US. Their insights could help design a robust and transparent licensing system at home. 2. Digital health solutions and capacity building. Many diaspora professionals have led initiatives in telemedicine, electronic health records, and mobile diagnostics. Through public-private partnerships, they could support Liberia's transition to a digitally enabled verification and monitoring system. 3. Funding and infrastructure development. Diaspora groups have historically contributed to the reconstruction of Liberia's health facilities, particularly after the Ebola crisis. Their involvement could expand to health governance projects, such as supporting the establishment of a national health credentials verification unit or a center for medical ethics and leadership. 4. Public advocacy and global media engagement. With access to international platforms, diaspora physicians could amplify calls for regulatory justice, ensuring the Dr. George case does not simply fade into bureaucratic obscurity. Their advocacy can also attract donor attention to push for deep-rooted reforms. Barriers to diaspora engagement. Despite this potential, the lack of formal government channels to engage diaspora expertise, limited incentives for returnees, and political tensions have historically discouraged consistent collaboration. Liberia's government, through the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, should consider establishing a medical diaspora engagement framework modeled after Ghana's Homecoming Summit or Rwanda's Diaspora Health Volunteer Program. The role of donors and international development partners. Liberia's health sector has long been supported by bilateral and multilateral donors, including USAID, World Bank, WHO, EU, and Global Fund. In the wake of the credentialing scandal, these actors now face a critical opportunity to influence governance reforms that go beyond infrastructure and service delivery. Leverage points for donors. 1. Conditional funding for institutional reforms require the establishment of independent oversight mechanisms as a prerequisite for future funding disbursements. Tie programmatic support to demonstrable steps toward transparency, accountability, and digital governance. 2. Technical assistance for licensing and regulation. Offer support to digitize health workforce registries and develop interoperable data systems for qualification verification. Facilitate South-South exchanges with countries that have successfully tackled similar crises, e.g., Rwanda, Kenya, India. 3. Support for legal frameworks and policy design fund the development of a Health Professional Standards Act, including whistleblower protections, conflict of interest safeguards, and ethics training modules. Provide consultants and legal experts to assist the Law Reform Commission and Ministry of Justice in legislative drafting. 4. Capacity building and training. Invest in the training of regulatory inspectors, medical auditors, and licensing board personnel. Create fellowships for Liberian professionals to learn best practices abroad and return with actionable solutions. 5. Monitoring and evaluation. Mandate transparent impact evaluations for all capacity building projects related to regulatory bodies. Include civil society and professional associations in oversight efforts to ensure reforms are not politicized or co-opted. A moment of reckoning, the path forward for Liberia's health sector. As Liberia stands at the crossroads of crisis and opportunity, the Dr. George case must be viewed not simply as an isolated scandal, but as a symptom of deeper institutional rot. The failure to verify credentials, protect professional advocacy, and enforce ethical standards is not just a regulatory failure. It's a public health risk and a blow to national integrity. But with the right blend of diaspora engagement, donor alignment, public pressure, and strong leadership, this crisis can become the launchpad for a reimagined health governance system. Whistleblower protections in West Africa, the missing shield. The Dr. George controversy and his assertion that the investigation against him was motivated by his advocacy for doctors' rights raises broader concerns about the lack of legal protections for whistleblowers and reform-minded professionals in Liberia and across West Africa. In fragile democracies, institutional capture and political retaliation often suppress those who challenge the status quo, creating a climate of fear that undermines accountability. Comparative review of whistleblower laws in ECOA states. Country Whistleblower Law, Policy Effectiveness and Scope. Ghana Whistleblower Act, 2006, offers formal protection but poorly enforced and rarely invoked. Nigeria. Whistleblower Protection Policy, 2016, limited to corruption, no overarching law or independent mechanism. Senegal Anti-Corruption Law, 2012, includes whistleblower clause, provides some protection but lacks enforcement structures. Liberia Whistleblower and Witness Protection Act, draft not passed. No formal law passed. Reform efforts stalled since 2015. Sierra Leone Anti-Corruption Act, 2008, includes protections administered by ACC. Some successes, but fear of retaliation persists. The absence of a binding, enforceable whistleblower framework in Liberia allowed Dr. George to be vulnerable, whether or not his actions were ethically sound. It also discourages future reformers who now see what the risks of advocacy can be in the absence of legal safeguards. To remedy this, Liberia, and by extension, other West African states, must prioritize enactment of comprehensive whistleblower legislation with clear channels for reporting and protection against retaliation, creation of independent whistleblower protection bodies, not tied to ministries or partisan oversight, public education campaigns to change cultural perceptions that equate whistleblowing with betrayal rather than civic duty, medical regulation and democratic backsliding, a dangerous convergence. This scandal is not only about credentials, it is also about governance. When professional bodies such as the LMDA and LMDC are vulnerable to political manipulation, the line between professional regulation and partisan enforcement becomes blurred. In such an environment, medical associations risk becoming extensions of political agendas rather than advocates for public health. Disciplinary processes are weaponized to punish dissent rather than uphold ethics. Professionals retreat into silence, fearing repercussions for speaking truth to power. The implications of this go far beyond medicine. It reflects a broader pattern seen across the continent, where democratic institutions are weakened by executive interference, undermining not only professionalism, but also citizen trust in governance. Advice to African leaders: turning crisis into opportunity. As this saga concludes, it is important to address African leaders, policymakers, and heads of professional regulatory bodies. The Dr. George case is not a Liberian problem alone. It is a mirror reflecting systemic weaknesses that many African states must confront. 5 key recommendations. 1. Strengthen regulatory independence. Remove licensing and disciplinary powers from direct political control. Create autonomous councils governed by transparent electoral processes and professional codes. 2. Digitize credentialing systems. Implement real-time, secure databases of practitioner qualifications. Use AI and blockchain tools to verify academic records and track professional conduct. 3. Support professional advocacy. Ensure that doctors, teachers, engineers, and other professionals can advocate without fear. Decriminalize legitimate dissent within professional sectors. 4. Enact whistleblower protection laws. Pass comprehensive legislation protecting those who expose corruption or malpractice. Ensure legal aid and psychological support for whistleblowers. 5. Invest in public trust and communication. In moments of crisis, respond swiftly, honestly, and with humility. Engage media, civil society, and international partners in reform dialogues. Summary of key messages. The revocation of Dr. Peter George's medical license has exposed deep flaws in Liberia's medical regulatory system and has wider implications for governance, public health, and democracy in Africa. The case underscores the urgent need for transparent credential verification systems, independent professional oversight, and whistleblower protections. Liberia's crisis reflects a continent-wide challenge where institutional weaknesses and political interference undermine the credibility of critical sectors like healthcare. By mobilizing the diaspora, leveraging donor influence, and learning from successful reforms in countries like Rwanda and Ghana, Liberia can turn this scandal into a launchpad for systemic reform. The future of African professionalism, particularly in medicine, depends on the ability of leaders to protect integrity, empower truth tellers, and prioritize people over politics. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV. If this story has sparked questions, anger, or hope for change, you're not alone. We at The Bold African Voice believe that by exposing the truth, comparing realities across Africa, and demanding better from our leaders, we take one step closer to the Africa we deserve. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more unfiltered analysis. And remember, in silence, dictators thrive. But in truth, Africa rises.